It's day 324. It's also March 25th, 2020, and we are in Osborne, Kansas. You ever wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what am I doing? And more importantly, why? Yeah, me too. Hi, my name's Craig, and this is my story. A story about life out there. For visuals while listening, search Life Out There on your favorite social media platform or use the links in the podcast description. Wherever you are this evening, sitting on your front porch, your back deck, a kitchen table, a desk at work, or in the middle of a small town in Kansas, surrounded by hayfields, just like we are. I hope you're exactly where you want to be and doing what you want to be doing, just like we are. Around every bend in the road, yet another example of the beauty of this country. I think I stopped being surprised quite a while back. I'd find myself so often wondering how it could possibly get any better. But it always did. And maybe not so much better, just another version of awesome. It's most always that way, the first time you see something, I think. And Vacilando has served the boys and I well. Transporting us into Kansas this morning from Oklahoma marks the 23rd state that we've traversed in the last 10 months. And as of our last fill-up, we've racked up 12,267 miles. And as I was adding up the miles, I was struck with two notions almost simultaneously. First, wow, we've seen a lot. And at the very same time, wow, what haven't we seen? Mostly, I think I love the randomness of it all. How the universe just seems to put things together. Like today. Driving west on Highway 15 out of Glencoe, Oklahoma, the rolling hills and open fields, the occasional patch of green signaling spring is just around the corner. We didn't get far before merging onto I-35 north towards Kansas. And given that the interstate really isn't our thing, as soon as we got into Kansas and past Wichita, we started looking for our exit. And we found it on Kansas Highway 24 West and drove deeper into America's heartland. Wide open wheat fields, transitioning to corn and then back to wheat, and the occasional wooded areas that began to give way to the occasional small town. Farmers atop their tractors prepping the fields for planting. As you pass through towns like Hoxie, Hill City, Stockton, Menlo, Moreland, Calker City, home of the world's largest ball of twine, by the way, Downs, and Beloit. And more randomness, turning here and there, picking two lanes on a whim, continuing to watch the plains and those rolling hills pass from the windshield to the rear view. And then, bam! Osborne, 22 miles, complete with an arrow pointing right. And you don't even really have to think before hitting the turn signal when you see your name on a sign. You have to trek that 22 miles for a look. And along that 22-mile drive, contemplating that your name is also someone else's. And it has been for a really long time. Way longer than you've had it. And these Osbornes over here in Kansas? Well, first of all, it's pronounced Osborne here in these parts. A region of the country that is literally a tale as old as time. A tale that we've read over and over, from coast to coast. And here in the heartland, little changes. Except maybe the players. Here, I'd read of the Cheyenne and the Sioux people. nomadic tribes that followed the buffalo across the region from season to season, and Spanish explorers would wander through in the 1500s, with the French not far behind them. And as the British entered the stage, this small band of a new breed, a new culture, primarily British, mixed with Scottish and Irish that were along for the ride, and over time, Germans, Dutch, French, all sorts had joined the pursuit of a life in a new world, and fighting for their own identity and sovereignty in this new world. In time, they'd begin calling themselves Americans, and mark the beginning of the Indian Wars. And like everywhere else across the young country, battles hard fought in this region. The Sioux, Cheyenne, Osage, Pawnee, Kansa people fought hard, stalling off surveying efforts and settlement for years. But in the end, the railway, or Iron Horse, made its way to Osborne, and quickly marked the end of the Native American lifestyle on the plains of North America. Many would be forced to cede millions of acres and be relegated to reservations in the area, and just as many would find themselves on the Trail of Tears, headed to a place called the New Indian Territory, Oklahoma. Kansas itself would be admitted to the Union as the 34th state in 1861, just months before the start of the Civil War, planting itself firmly on the Union side of things. And shortly after the end of the war, a group of folks some 1,200 miles away in Pennsylvania would form the Pennsylvania Colony. The group of some 60 or 70 had found themselves victims of a post-war economy, and with land grants being issued out west, they'd set out in 1868 in search of their future. And over half of the men in the original Pennsylvania colony were Civil War veterans, so they had a shared goal and a sense of camaraderie as they set out on their adventure. A good deal of that trek would be made by railway, landing them in a place called Walterville, Kansas, where the colony would spend a couple of weeks forming a wagon train, which is exactly how they would trek the final 125 miles and discover Osborne. 3 years would pass between when the original colony members set out and 1871, when over 250 colony members had found their way to the fertile soils and natural abundance of Osborne and this corner of Kansas. Osborne City would be founded and named for Vincent B. Osborne, a Union Army veteran, and officially incorporated in 1878. And it's so interesting to me to learn yet again how different perspectives can be. During the 90s, I'd worked for a company whose corporate headquarters were in Wichita, Kansas, so I've been to Kansas many times. But I never saw this Kansas. I'd hear jokes about how flat and boring Kansas is. Flat as a pancake. Or you can watch your dog run away for days in Kansas. But 150 years ago, a group of pioneers came across Kansas. They saw nothing but opportunity. Those wide open spaces and fertile soils, ample water supplies, well, that meant struggles could maybe end, and more importantly, dreams could maybe come true. It certainly wasn't easy. Nothing worth anything ever is, I suppose. They'd have to endure the constant attempts by the Native Americans to take back their land. It seems that they had the same affinity for this place called Kansas, and they weren't going to give it up without a fight. They'd also have to endure the characteristics of a continental climate, hot summers and cold winters. Hottest temperature on record in Osborne? 116 degrees. Arizona's got nothing on these folks. Coldest temperature on record? Negative 31 degrees. But they'd make it through all that to become what Osborne is today. A town of 1,300 on the South Fork of the Solomon River, in the heart of America. Literally. 34 miles away from Osborne is a place called Lebanon, Kansas, which is the geographic center of the United States. So you really cannot get much deeper into the heart of these United States than where we're sitting right now. And I'd also read that Osborne's town center is just a few degrees north of the North American Geodetic Center. Now, having no clue what that meant, the internet explained that the North American Geodetic Center is a key reference point used for surveying and mapping the continent. It serves as the primary station for all North American surveys. This point, established in 1901 by the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey, and is essential for creating accurate maps and coordinates across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. So basically, I had just learned that in the world of surveying and map making in the United States, Osborne, Kansas, exactly where we're sitting tonight, is quite literally where the mapping universe begins. Pretty cool. I'd also learn, as if you couldn't tell by looking around, that Osborne is considered a nature lover's paradise. The abundance of antelope and elk make these north-central mountains of Kansas a popular destination for hunters as well. I'd also watch a local PBS special highlighting the town's focus on putting together just the right balance of agriculture and industrialization. The town's got its own industrial park in which they offer free land for companies willing to move to and contribute to the town's future. And fold in the strong sense of community, over a dozen local businesses, and it looks like you've got yourself a pretty cool little slice of small-town America. Osborne is also home to multiple buildings listed on the National Register of Historic Buildings. But one stuck out for me. Having just learned of the Carnegie family presence on Cumberland Island in Georgia, I was surprised to see the name here in Osborne. The Osborne Carnegie Public Library. Seems Andrew Carnegie, the wealthy industrialist, and the name you'll find splashed all over New York, was also a man, I'd learn, with a lifelong passion for education and making knowledge accessible to anyone that wanted it. One of his many philanthropic ventures, donating over $50 million throughout his life to funding over 2,500 public libraries across the country. And one of those libraries? Right here in Osborne. It was 1912 when Dr. Henschel, the mayor of Osborne at the time, wrote to Andrew Carnegie requesting funds for a library building, and Carnegie would approve a gift of $6,000 for the project. Construction would begin later that year, and the library opened its doors in July of 1913. And for the next 82 years, the library remained open to the public. And it remains open to the public to this day. But now, the building functions as a regional history and genealogical library. It's managed by the Osborne County Genealogical and Historical Society. Some pretty cool stuff, and a ton of history packed into a little town called Osborne in Kansas. This place has been, and still is, a lot of things. It's also the sort of place where homecoming each year is still a big deal. We're talking parade sort of big deal. It's also the sort of place that watches out for their own and celebrates successes, big and small. I saw an evening news clip in which one of Osborne's own graduated high school here in town, went on to Kansas State. Then he took his love of basketball out into the world and found his way to the head coach position in West Virginia. And to this day, every time he ends up back in Kansas, playing against his own hometown team, Osborne still, in a way, finds itself rooting for the hometown kid. Seems that's what they do here. We're going to fall asleep tonight amidst the corn and hayfields of Osborne, Kansas. The three of us tucked inside Vacilando, listening to the birds chatter away at the evening and the barking of ranch dogs in the distance, knowing full well we'll probably wake up tomorrow to the very same thing. And yeah, pandemic. Still messing things up. It's here too, in Osborne. A walk this evening showed us most everything in town shut down. Gas station was the only thing we saw open, so it doesn't seem much visiting will take place here. So we'll quietly continue our trek west, wondering where we'll pull off to sleep tomorrow night, and wondering what we'll learn there.
Turns out, this thing called life comes with a lot of rules. Maybe it's time to break a few. Because you can. No, seriously, you can.